Welcome back to Wrestling Roundtable Radio. Blessed be. I am your spiritual healer, Eric Santamaria, here to lift your spirits once again. Blessed be. We're back after a couple weeks with our new bi-weekly format, and we have a lot to talk about. But before we do that, let's get to the plugs, of course. WrestlingRoundtable.com. Please support the show. Get the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt. Check out WrestlingRoundtable.com. Bill Treadway has the Raw recap from the very controversial and talked about show that aired last night, which we will be talking about later on. Our message board, also at WrestlingRoundtable.com, really lit up with talk about the NXT invasion. But like I said, we will be getting to that later. And we also want to remind you that if you are listening to us live, you are listening to us on blogtalkradio.com/WrestlingRoundtable, and we want to hear your thoughts. The number is 347-857-4647. Please give us your name and location when we bring you up. And if you're not listening to us live, that means you're listening to us on either YouTube or iTunes. So you might want to get with the program and listen to us live, but either way, you're listening to us, and that's what counts. So please remember to subscribe, share, and rate wherever you are. And now let's bring up the first thing that we are going to talk about is mixed martial arts. UFC 114 happened a couple weeks ago, and we want to catch up on that. So first we are going to bring up some panelists, Will Vafides and Rodney LeConte. Hello, Will.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I do have 101 fever, but I am here to support the round table.
Thank you, and thanks for fighting through your sickness to give us your thoughts. And hello, Rod. Hey, yo.
Hey, yo, Eric. How's everyone doing out there? GrapplingKings.com.
Can't wait for that documentary to come out.
Yeah.
And we also want to bring on Chris Harris. Hello, Chris.
What's going on, guys?
Can barely hear you, but we're going to get back to you when we get to some more of the specific fights. Going down the card, it opened with the welterweight bout where John Hathaway defeated Diego Sanchez. Now, it seems that this begun a trend throughout the night where almost every fight ended in a decision, and the one that didn't was a huge knockout, which we will cover in a little bit. But John Hathaway defeated Diego Sanchez, who moved up to welterweight. Last time we saw him, I believe he was challenging BJ Penn for the lightweight title, and seems as if he's going to cut weight back to that division. How do you think he did, Will?
I was very upset because I love Diego Sanchez. You know, again, it was a unanimous decision. I was really shocked because I really thought Diego Sanchez had this. And I just, you know, John Hathaway, you know, did a very good job against a very tough fighter. I mean, it was a good fight, very tough fighter.
You think he's making a good decision, Rod, by going back down to lightweight?
I think right now he probably should have stayed at welterweight. Obviously, he went up to welterweight for a reason, and that was because maybe the weight cut was too much for him, or maybe he was just put in his place, you could say, by BJ Penn. I mean, the only reason why I'd like to see him stay at lightweight is because I want to see a Sanchez-Florian rematch. But I think welterweight, he was still a strong welterweight, and if he feels that he can perform better, then, you know, I'm always up for a fighter performing better at the way he feels comfortable.
Well, to be fair, BJ Penn can make anybody look bad, you would think. Kenny Florian and Diego Sanchez looked pretty strong in their fights before they challenged BJ Penn for the title, and he made them look like amateurs in comparison. So that's just the level that BJ Penn was on, at least before he got unseated by Frankie Edgar. But let's move on to Little Nog. Antonio Rogero, Nogueira, Minotauro, whatever. How many nicknames does this guy have? This practical clone of his older brother at light heavyweight won a decision against Jason Brills, and a lot of controversy here. Even Dana White saying after the fact that he thought Brills should have won, but once again falling back on these guys should not let it go to decision. Do you think that he's right in this capacity, Will? Dana White said that these fighters should not let the fights go to decision. Is this a perfect example?
Definitely. I mean, because, you know, Rich took Nogueira down right away. You know, I mean, he was doing pretty good, you know, and then you definitely got to try to win. I mean, it's like no one's trying to win then when I feel like when that happens. So that's why split decisions are always never the best thing. for any UFC fight. It's like you didn't prove anything by having a split decision.
Who do you think won this fight, Chris?
It was so back and forth, I really couldn't call it. When we were watching the fight, I don't think anybody knew who clearly was the winner of this, and it could have gone either way, and, Nog didn't look horrible, but maybe I would have given it to Brill.
What about you, Rod? What was your call?
Well, I heard a lot about this fight before I saw it, and I didn't watch it live, and it was hard for me to believe that Rogero got close to, or even people were disappointed that he won. And then I saw the fight, and I could exactly see what they're talking about. This was probably, honestly, one of the best fights I've seen, probably the best fight I've seen since the Big Nog and Couture fight, back at UFC 102. And probably one of the best grappling matches I've seen in MMA. John Fitch and Paul Thiago at 100 was very good too, but I think this one exceeded it. But when Dana White says that he wants guys to finish the fight, I understand what he's talking about. I understand that most guys, their incentive, their goal is to go out there and finish fights, whether to get that win bonus, get them up the ranks, if you will. But it's kind of hard when you go out there and try to submit this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Obviously he wants to, but he can't just be in the middle of the fight like, okay, well, I guess now it's time to just choke out one of the Nogueira brothers. It's not an easy job, but, I mean, he really proved himself to be a legit fighter, especially coming off a loss from Elliot Marshall, who didn't even make it to the semifinals in the Ultimate Fighter competition, and he didn't really have a lot of expectations in this fight. And coming in this fight short notice, it just shows that sometimes you just got to take chances. I think it did a lot. It definitely helped him more than it helped Little Nog in this fight.
We move on from yet another decision at light heavyweight to the heavyweight division, the only heavyweight bout on this card, and what Joe Rogan was already saying was the best comeback in UFC history. Mike Russo, after coming into the cage against a guy who is clearly in much better shape physically and seemingly set up as a tomato can for the then 6-0 Ted Duffy, and got dominated for about the first round and a half or so, all of a sudden, huge comeback, knockout victory over Todd Duffy. And it was one of those moments that just makes you stand up out of your seat and make you start cheering. This is why you love MMA. What'd you think of that knockout, Chris?
I thought it was really unbelievable. Duffy was clearly favored. He has the record for the fastest knockout in 8 seconds. He was dominating the guy. I'm shocked this guy made it to the second round after that first round. He took a beating. And to come back like that and knock somebody out, that's really impressive. And he might not be in the best shape, but this guy might have a good future. He's going to knock people out like this.
Does this just go to show that you can't ever underestimate anybody in MMA, Will?
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect example where it's really an even fight. I don't care if someone has more wins than another one. I don't care if someone knocks him out in 7 seconds. The point is that it's an even fight until they're actually in the ring. Now, it's just like a game of pool, man. No one's winning until someone gets the 8-ball in. This is how I kind of compare it. UFC is the same thing. You could be dominating 2 rounds, and then in 1 round, one shot can knock them out. So that's how I compare it. It's just like a pool game.
Rod, your thoughts?
Definitely one of the most shocking things I've seen, almost in comparison to the infamous Crocop kick with Gonzaga. Best comeback, I would put that up there along with the Scott Metz knockout over Kung Lee. But yeah, Todd Duffy was a guy that the Zuffa marketing machine was definitely behind. He was on ESPN. He was on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, and he almost looked like a younger Shane Carwin.
Plus, he was also undefeated at 6-0 and thrown into an already stacked heavyweight division.
Oh yeah, and when you come in an already stacked heavyweight division and you knock a guy out in record time, that's going to open up a lot of eyes. So I think everyone pretty much had high hopes for him, and he seemed to be delivering for the most part. But it just shows that in MMA, it really just takes 1 second and one mistake for the fight to turn around, and man, did that derail the Duffy train.
Well, if UFC had a tag division, I could see Mike Russo and Roy Nelson teaming up as the Kentucky Fried Tag Team. But moving on to the middleweight division, Michael Bisping. Yeah, that Michael Bisping gets a decision over Dan Miller. Does the world care, Will?
Well, I care because Dan Miller's a Jersey guy. So I care for that reason. But I would say no. I think because it was a unanimous decision, I think Bisping had chances to put him away. You know, that's how I look at it. Again, there was on this fight, if I'm reading correctly, there was 6 unanimous decisions on this fight. That's a lot. You know, especially the 2 that were the main event. So, I mean, this fight really, I mean, after the knockout, I think that killed this momentum for this one. So, I mean, yeah, Bisping won. It's great that he won. He's going to move up in the division. But like I said, it wasn't really an exciting, you know, I really care about the fight. You know, it was okay. That's just bad that Dan Miller lost. And Dana White was questioning if Dan Miller will even remain in the UFC, which, you know, that's a question mark right now.
Well, what I mean is Michael Bisping's been much maligned for what's supposedly been an artificially jacked up record where he's been put what's alleged to have been against mostly tomato can level talent and hasn't necessarily been challenged. And I think a lot of people were bringing that back to light when he got knocked out by Dan Henderson last year at 100. Would you agree with that, Rod? Or does this solidify him in a way?
Well, I think this solidifies him as he could be in the almost upper tier of the middleweight division. He definitely, guys like Dan Miller and Dennis Kay, he definitely showed that he's above that level. And pretty much, you know, his only losses are all to former champions. And one of them was at when he was in light heavyweight division. I mean, it didn't prove too much. As for Dan Miller's performance, the guy did go in there. He did fight. I know he had a lot of personal issues going in there. And Dana White said in the press conference, asked about Dan Miller's future, and he said that, you know, all he asked is for guys to fight. And maybe he'll take into consideration what Dan Miller was going through. But Dan Miller, you know, it wasn't like Kimbo's fights where he just looked like he didn't belong in the UFC. He came in there, maybe didn't implement the best takedown. He didn't use so much of his wrestling and submission skills. But, I mean, against a guy like Bisping, losing, you shouldn't really be ashamed of it.
Well, last we knew of, at least last I read of, rather, Dan Miller was going to get another chance in UFC, but you think Michael Bisping's going to get another chance in the fans' eyes again, Chris, outside of the UK at least?
I don't think so. I think he really ruined it with running his mouth a lot. He's not clearly dumb, you know. He's not knocking people out in there. I really think that the Henderson knockout, he lost the big edge there. Like a lot of guys do, I think it becomes a mental fear that these guys have getting knocked out. They're very careful with what they do. But I don't think the fans are ever going to come around to him. Guys like him and Koscheck, even though they can win keep winning, same with Brock. They can win and win and win. The fans just don't like them.
Well, I think it's safe to say that Brock has a lot more it factor than either of those, but
yeah, but MMA, just like wrestling, it needs appeals to sell fights.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously the big appeal of this pay-per-view card was the much-anticipated Rashad Quinton Jackson light heavyweight fight. Originally supposed to take place in Memphis last year, and that did not happen because B.A. Baracus was calling, and Quinton Jackson, who just appeared last night on Raw as that character in question with the guy from District 9. At least that's the way I refer to him as, and I'm sure everybody else does. That movie took precedent over this fight and added a lot of fuel to the fire, and it became a much-anticipated fight, especially after the countdown show that happened a few weeks leading up to this. And I think it almost did double the buy rate of the Shogun Machida rematch from the month before. So a lot of people were interested in this fight, and we're going to bring on yet another panelist to talk about it. Hello, Jay.
Eric, how you doing, man?
Doing okay, all things considered. I'll tell you what, though, I feel like I'm just coming up for air and getting a life back, having just finished the Pro Wrestling Respect 2 Delirious vs. Ridge DVD, but we'll talk about Respect a little later on. Finishing up with UFC, the main event. Rashad defeated Quentin Jackson by decision, and when we made our predictions last week, I think no one really called a decision victory.
I thought if Rampage was going to win, he would have won by knockout or stoppage. I thought if Rashad was going to win, he was going to win by a decision because he's got that type of style where he just pins a guy against the cage and takes him down relentlessly and doesn't really do all that much damage. And it was obvious that Rampage wasn't in the shape he should have been in. His mind wasn't on this fight like he should have been. But he did hurt Rashad. I think he hurt Rashad more than he was hurt in the fight. And if he would have landed those strikes against the cage towards the end in the third round, he probably would have had the victory. But Rashad Evans was in better shape, and that seemed to be the turning point.
You think that it's a surprise that it went to decision, Will?
I was hoping not to, but
I don't think anybody was hoping that it would go to decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, this is the kind of fight that you would not want to go to a decision.
Sure.
This is just a fight where, these two guys hate each other. Why are they not pounding the crap out of each other and really trying to win the fight? It almost seems like, Quentin was definitely out of shape. I don't think he wants to fight anymore, personally, just looking at him. I knew Rashad was going to win this fight. It's just because the guy was not, Quentin was not ready for this. He has to get back in training, and he's been out of the octagon for like a year, so he just wasn't ready for this, and it actually hurt his chances and it hurt his reputation as who he is. I think that's the problem. It's like he's become a lazy guy.
Well, since that fight, he's called acting gay, quote unquote, and has tweeted the hell out of his appearance on Raw. Chris, as a huge Rampage Jackson fan, disappointed or not surprised?
If it went past one round, I kind of figured that Rashad was going to get it in the end. But you could definitely tell that Rampage was gone for 14 months. He showed all of that. Just not being there, not fighting. He definitely wasn't training. Yeah, he had the chance in the third round, and he just didn't take advantage. When he walked out to the ring, he had that old Rampage killer instinct look in his eye. But as soon as that bell rang, it was gone. You could tell he wasn't in the fight mentally.
Final thoughts, Rod?
The decision win by Rashad is not something surprising. I think we all could have known it's going to happen in the back of the heads, but I just wanted to predict Rampage because I wanted Rampage to win. The fact is that Rashad had a year, these two had a year to study each other, and Rashad had a fight in January against Thiago Silva as a warm-up fight. I think if Rampage would have had a similar situation, it would have been a lot different. If you look at the way, Rampage after the long layoffs tends to be, very hesitant in his fighting style. If you look at his fights with Chuck Liddell, with Vanderlei Silva, even with Keith Jardine, after he had a warm-up fight, he's pushing the pace, he's in the guy's face, he's more aggressive. But after this long layoff, you could tell that ring rust was definitely a factor. He was very scared to, let his hands go. And I think if he would have charged at Rashad has trouble with guys who puts the pressure on him. It could have been a different outcome. If it went 5 rounds, who knows? Rampage did look a little less gassed than Rashad. I wouldn't say he was completely gassed because he was still throwing punches until the bell. I think this is to say that it shouldn't have gone to decision. These are two high-level athletes, so I know it'd be kind of difficult to finish the other one, even though Rampage did have his chance. But this is one of those fights I think that should have been 5 rounds.
Well, this talk on MMA and UFC has gone to the limit, and now we're going to move on to pro wrestling. And for that, I'd like to bring on Lawrence Haber. Hello, Lawrence.
Hey, Eric, and hey, Wrestling Roundtable panel and fans. I know everybody's here to hear about TNA Impact tonight. It's the hottest topic in wrestling, so that's what we're going to talk about, right?
Not at all. One of the things I did mention earlier was the Pro Wrestling Respect DVD. The second Respect show is now available on Go Fight Live, so if you don't want to wait for the DVD and get all the extras and packaging, you just care about the show, you can download it there for $4.95 at GoFightLive.tv. Excuse me. So, I wanted to bring you guys on because the Roundtable is a sponsor of Pro Wrestling Respect, as some of you know. I've mentioned it on the show before, and I thought it'd be real interesting, being that we just did a show on Sunday, Pro Wrestling Respect 3, which, by the way, was a pretty hot day. This cold front that came in the past couple days, where was it on Sunday? We could have really used that cool wind on Sunday. It was a pretty hot afternoon. But regardless, the show went on, and I thought it'd be interesting to bring you guys on to talk about it because obviously most of us on the panel are fans of wrestling and have been a long time. Some of us have worked in wrestling in different capacities, and I did want to use the show in a way to bridge the gap that this almost backwards relationship that wrestlers and wrestling has with its own fans. It's like an abusive relationship almost, looking down on one side when really should be a little more open, I think. We wanted to hear all different sides and all different perspectives, and now an added element to the show is that we've all been involved in running a wrestling show. Our third show in, and I wanted to get some of your thoughts on it. Let's start with you, Lawrence. You've been watching wrestling for over 20 years, and now you get to be part of the show, so to speak. What's your experience in actually being involved in helping run a wrestling show for the past few months?
Well, having been involved in various elements of production in personal and professional life outside of wrestling, I know the amount of detail and attention that must go into creating a production for people, especially when you're trying to entertain them and create an illusion like wrestling does. So being that I have this personal experience, and then I also have this, I guess what you call a rhythm or feel for wrestling as a fan, I know how absolutely important and pivotal it is to keep the illusion, so to speak, going, and how keenly aware smart fans and marks, so to speak, are of everything going on during the show. The fans are aware of the sound, they're aware of, the people in the stands, they're aware of everything going on. So when you have this experience with producing something, then you have this kind of sensibility about how perfect everything needs to be. It's actually really, really nerve-wracking in a way, knowing that you're kind of under a microscope because you've got wrestlers out there trying to put on a performance. You've got fans who kind of know everything going on, and you want everything to be absolutely perfect. So being involved in the production of a wrestling event, it really is another level, and it definitely gives me a greater appreciation for not only what the wrestlers do, but just how aware fans really are of what's going on. It's remarkable reading reviews of shows and criticisms of things, not even Pro Wrestling Respect, just in general, especially the way we talk about wrestling on this show and on the YouTube show. But when you're there and you're on the other side of that fence and you're kind of the person that has to make it work, you really get why it's such a unique, and I'm going to use this word because I know it's overused, but it's okay in this context, business. It really is very unique and a really great process, and I'm very happy to be involved.
Speaking of the fans and being aware of things, we are going to be taking calls in a little bit, but before we do, wanted to ask, Will, you were at the first Pro Wrestling Respect show. I know you've been involved at some level of doing some sort of other wrestling shows, and I was wondering how this one compared to some of the other ones you've been in.
The crowd was very knowledgeable in the product, which is always a good thing because, you got to have people who know people, or being a pro wrestler for 2 years, you learn a lot about the business. You learn a lot about, how it's set up, how much work it really takes to do this. This is not a cheap thing to do. Most promotions don't make it past a year or a couple months, because they just can't get a crowd there. Pro Wrestling Respect has got a great bunch of talent that has ROH backing them up, which is always a strong thing. When you got a strong promotion backing up that promotion, that's always a good thing. And the first show was actually really good. The one incident that I will always remember, and I'll probably remember for a long time, was the incident where Orange Cassidy knocked down his orange juice, and he actually slid across the orange juice and actually clotheslined his opponent, which was one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time, and I know the crowd really enjoyed that. So that, to me, was like a moment of the show. It was really great. But it's important for people to know that this takes a lot of work, and most companies lose money in the first year.
When Orange did that, he really had to concentrate.
Ooh, ha, ha. Hey, Leto, you got to ring the bell at the first Pro Wrestling Respect show, and hope to have you again soon once your schedule lightens up a little, but wanted to know what you thought about being involved in a wrestling show.
I had an absolute blast, Eric. Everything from helping put the ring together to talking to the wrestlers and interacting with everybody was just great. It was a great experience. I love being a part of the show, ringing the bell. It was great, man. I felt like I was actually a part of it. I had connection with the referee at times, you know. And Pro Wrestling Respect is a good promotion. It's family friendly. There's great wrestling. I was really surprised about the work rate in the first show. It was better than I expected. And I can't wait to see the second and third show. I'm really excited for it, and I can't wait to be involved again. So hopefully the next time there's a show, I'll be involved.
Chris, you've done some work behind the scenes, behind the camera, and you've been ringside. You seem to have a blast at the second Pro Wrestling Respect show. Not that you don't have fun at the other ones, but that one especially. What are your thoughts on being involved in a wrestling show?
Yeah, for the past years, I've been working part-time. I do a lot of camera jobs and lighting and everything. So doing the hard cam isn't that much different, except I only get one take. That's the big difference for me. So it is a little more stressful with that. But being part of the show itself was ringing the bell. That's great. That was like a dream come true. Sitting right there, just like Jay said, you're a part of the show. It's great.
Rodney, your thoughts on helping out and being part of a pro wrestling event?
It's pretty interesting. I mean, I don't really get to see that much of the action in the crowd. I'm backstage with Midge, helping do the interviews and segments for the DVD. But I think it's very, very interesting growing up as a wrestling fan and seeing these guys. For the most part, everyone is very nice. There's a great camaraderie between the talent and everyone else who's involved because, I don't know, maybe it's because if it's a small organization, but I think everyone's pretty much there to help out each other. And being part of the promos act, it's good to, get everyone together and, like, me and Mitch come up with, ideas in a row and then be able to put our creative input and, help, talent who are struggling with their promos. And to see how they are before the camera turns on and then see that the energy just come right through the screen. It's pretty interesting, and it makes the time go by fast. And it's especially good when you have a hot summer Sunday like that and you're in a promo room with nice air conditioning. Definitely has its perks.
Must be nice.
Oh, it was.
We're going to have actually a surprise guest on from the Pro Wrestling Respect roster in a little bit. But before we do, I want to bring on Will from New Jersey. Hello, Will.
How's it going, guys?
Hey, Will. You've been, I believe, to all 3 Pro Wrestling Respect shows so far, haven't you?
That is correct.
How do you feel about Pro Wrestling Respect? How'd we do?
I got to admit, the last one you guys had, Pro Wrestling Respect 3, was probably the best one you've had so far.
Oh,
I mean, you had a lot of great wrestling. It was a lot of fun, and I lost some weight while I was there, so it was kind of cool.
You and me both. At least you didn't have to run around in a suit in that heat. But also want to bring on, like I said, our special guest, and that is from Pro Wrestling Respect, Alex Payne. Hello, Alex.
How you doing, Eric? How's everybody else doing?
Oh, we're doing all right. And like I said before, I was trying to bridge a gap in a way with the roundtable and kind of bring fan and wrestler and industry professional all at the same table, so to speak, and get a nice open exchange of ideas. And I wanted to bring you on especially because you started off as a wrestler about 4 years or so ago, give or take, and you were a wrestling fan practically since you were born. So what's it like going from fan to backyarder to in the ring? What's it like really knowing the right way to do it and get proper training?
Well, if you don't get proper training, for one, you're missing the boat on a lot of things. There's a lot of little intricate things, whether it's just your whole decorum and how to treat people in and outside of wrestling, which can be positive and negative, of course, as you mentioned. And just knowing how to carry yourself as a wrestler, have the ability to go on a ring and perform at a certain level, especially when you go to the Ring of Honor Wrestling Academy, which obviously you know that's where I'm from, but just to have that level of expectations. And
well, let's put it this way, not to interrupt you, but when you trained, you were under Austin Aries, and then right afterwards, Bryan Danielson took over. And I think a lot of people were intimidated to go train under Bryan Danielson because his reputation is such. He's a very hard worker, and he's a very skilled athlete. Mm-hmm. And Austin Aries, you could say the same thing about practically. Yeah. And, I mean, you could practically say that about almost everybody. I mean, CM Punk before everybody, now Delirious. It's a pretty high level that Ring of Honor is on, and it's not exactly, let's say, if this was ECW, yeah, Taz could be on that level, but a lot of the ECW roster didn't have that reputation as wrestler either.
Yeah, you're right, you're correct. I mean, you got to look at it from my perspective. When I go and I look for other independent bookings, and I mention that I'm from Ring of Honor, there's a lot of people that the light bulb goes off and like, oh, wow, this guy's from Ring of Honor.
Yeah, they perk up.
They want to use you. That name holds a lot of clout with a lot of people, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. Sometimes people are afraid of the fact that, oh, we have these Ring of Honor graduates on the show that might upstage some of these other guys, and they may not want that. Or there's other organizations that's like, wow, they're from Ring of Honor. Let's give these guys a shot. Like, let's put them on the show. Let's give them some wrestling. So for us, it's a pride thing, in that we want to. I know for myself especially that I feel like I have a standard to uphold when I'm wrestling in front of any sort of audience.
Well, we were talking about Pro Wrestling Respect, and you've been on all 3 Pro Wrestling Respect shows. First of all, how are you feeling after the last show on Sunday? And secondly, what's your impression of Respect as an organization overall?
Well, as for last Sunday, I'm still a little stiff. My neck's a little sore.
A lot of hard shots to the head in that match.
Yeah, me and Hagedorn, I can swear, correct? Beat the shit out of each other.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if the fan that was in attendance, like me and Hagedorn, we threw out on the line. It's something we wanted to wrestle each other for the longest time in the singles. And to have a singles match go the way it did and wrestle the way we wanted to and do things that we wanted to do in that ring. The show, stick it in some people's craw and show that people from the Ring of Honor Wrestling Academy can go or have the ability to have these intense matches. And that was a big thing for me and him to go out there and show the 150, 160 people in Burlington that afternoon, that we can go and we want to do this. But we have it inside us to wrestle at that level. That was a big deal. And, if a little bumps and scrapes, sore neck is a sacrifice I have to take. But my own personal pride and integrity was a much bigger deal that afternoon.
So you were happy with how it went?
Yes.
Those people appreciated it too, Alex. Everyone should know going to a show, whether it's a small show or a big show, when you do a good job and you're intense, like Alex and Hagedorn were in that particular match, and just the whole card in general, the people definitely appreciate it, and that's something nobody should ever forget when they're watching wrestling.
Yeah, like the fact that at the end of the match the crowd applauded was it was a big deal to me. And especially in Jersey, people may know me as the guy that gets cheered only in Chicago or whatever, but to have a Jersey crowd appreciate how hard I worked that night. But Jersey's a tough crowd to please. Was very meant a lot to me that night, and I hope to do that every time. Whether I'm wrestling Respect or wrestling somewhere else, it doesn't matter. Like, I have a lot I want to prove still. It doesn't matter whether I've been wrestling for 4 years, 3 years, whatever the hell it is. I have a lot I want to prove still.
Well, cool. Respect and Burlington, New Jersey might not be where you're going to be proving it, at least for the short term, because I guess this is an announcement. I don't think it's out there yet, but I guess let's break some news here on Wrestling Roundtable Radio. Happy to announce that Alex Payne is going to be training at the Pro Wrestling Noah Dojo in Japan.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Eric. You yourself have known that I've been in negotiations with trying to go over to Japan for quite a while now.
You're also the one that told me not to tell anybody because we wanted to wait for the proper time. So now is the proper time, I guess, because you're going to be leaving in about a week and a half, I guess, right?
Week and a half, 2 weeks.
All right. Well, I wanted to bring that up because I wanted to find out about some more about that and spread the word because I'm, first of all, very proud to have someone from the Pro Wrestling Respect roster training in Japan at all. And I'm very happy that it's you because we've known each other for several years now, and Pro Wrestling Noah is a really big deal. So how did this come about?
Basically, I asked to go. I wanted to go bad, and it's been a dream of mine to go to Japan. Growing up watching tapes of Muda or watching tapes of Sasuke or Michinoku or Liger and all these other guys, and then watching how Noah itself has grown and watching guys like Kenta, Marufuji, Kabashi, Misawa, the list goes on and on. Those are the top marquee guys we all know, but guys like Kanemaru, guys like Ishimori and Tanahashi, these guys are just amazing. And to be able to have the opportunity to go to Noah and train at that caliber, because those guys over there, they take wrestling very seriously. It's not portrayed the same way as it is here in America. And as much as, I would wish that wrestling was portrayed the same way as it is in Japan over here, or have that same level of respect, it doesn't necessarily happen over here in the States as much. And to be able to go to Japan and hopefully live up to that standard, and the training standard of what's expected out there is such a big deal, and it's so important for me to go. And to have the opportunity, after I basically asked, I guess they're impressed that I was interested in even going, and to be able to work out a deal with Ken Hariyama and the vice president to get this done, it still hasn't hit me. It
will. Give it a couple weeks.
Oh yeah, I know. Oh, trust me. When I'm flying across the ocean, I will be really. I'll be waking up. Oh, totally. It's amazing, Eric. It's an amazing feeling to feel like to know that you're living a dream and you're going to accomplish something. And whether I wrestle a match there or not, that's the least of my worries. I'm more concerned of going over there and training and having the ability to improve. Because everyone in wrestling says you go to Japan, one level of wrestler. By the time you get back from Japan, you're at a different level. And whether it's a dramatic step up or just so many steps up, somehow, some way you improve. And that's what I'm hoping for. I feel like I'm a pretty decent wrestler, but just to have more training and more learning, more knowledge that I had before is just so much more important to me, and I'm so excited for this opportunity.
Are you apprehensive at all? Because not only is Japan the place that is a very strong reputation home for pro wrestling, it's also a completely different culture and country. Any apprehension? I'm going to just forget that word. Are you nervous about Japan?
A little bit. The culture is much different, of course, but from what I hear, the culture is so much better than here. And to have the opportunity
that's
to
by
around
fanboys on the internet. Don't listen to them.
Oh yeah, but I'm more concerned with my training more so. I've been told I'm around a lot of good people that are going to help me out, and I supposedly from what I hear, there's plenty of English for me to read, so I won't feel completely foreign. So I'm ready as much as I can be at this moment.
But are you apprehensive?
Thank you, Lawrence.
Alex, I have a question for you. It's Rodney. How's it going, man?
How's it going, Rod?
Good. Just to quickly go back to respect, what is the main difference between wrestling in respect and between any other organizations that you worked for?
Well, Respect is very organized. The guys get there
Not a common
early.
trait in wrestling?
Not a common trait. It's really not. I mean, even it emulates Ring of Honor in a lot of ways, where there is a schedule. Things have to get done. We have to move things. Everything has to be paced. It's basically anyone who's graduated from the Ring of Honor Wrestling Academy busting their ass just to get this thing right off the ground and get going. And a lot of us have that experience with doing the ring crew from Ring of Honor for years. We now know that it's on our shoulders now. And it's not on Kerry or Sid or whoever else is running it. It's Delirious, it's me, it's Hagedorn, it's Pelly, it's Andy Ridge, Red Titus, Bobby. It's everybody else coming there at Burlington and making sure this show gets off the ground because it's our asses, and we have a lot to prove. And it's not just even us. It's Eric, it's Lawrence, Rodney, everybody, Midge. We all come together. We bust our ass. We get things done. And unlike in some other independents that don't, it's a promoter and a booker, or it could be the same person for the matter, and it's for some of their friends helping out, setting up chairs, setting up a ring or whatever, and maybe they're students too. Some places just aren't as organized. Other places are really organized. And it's knocking a lot of places because hey, if that's how they have to run shows, that's how they have to run shows, and I'm sure they'd like to be more efficient. Another person who does a really great job at running shows is Sammy Callahan. He does shows in Egg Harbor, New Jersey. He's very organized. For someone as young as he is, basically running a show by himself, he's extremely organized. I don't know how he possibly can do it. But the rest of us, here in Respect, from Eric, your crew of guys who I genuinely enjoy having at the show, it kind of helps add a more of a lighthearted atmosphere and having a new energy, a very excited energy to just help out and learn or do whatever. And even Rodney was saying earlier that the suggestions that they make to wrestlers, him and Midge have suggested certain ideas for me for promos or interviews, for that matter. And I have no problem with listening to them because they've probably spent more time in front of a camera than I have my whole entire life, So I know Rod does film, so I'm gonna be listening to him. I'm gonna take his advice, and if he has anything for me, I'm gonna say, hey, Rod, what's your opinion on this? And Eric too. There's plenty of times I've bounced ideas off of you, and everybody does just a great job of helping out. And if it isn't said to you guys enough, I thoroughly appreciate you guys being there. And Eric for busting his ass on getting these DVDs out and putting out a good DVD product of professional wrestling so other people can see what Eric's capable of doing, for one, and to show what the Ring of Honor Wrestling Academy can do, considering how underrated I think we all as a whole are.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and I hope it's been taken to heart by our audience, who will hopefully be supporting us by getting Pro Wrestling Respect t-shirts, DVDs, or downloads at GoFi Live, or you can check it out at ProWrestlingRespect.com. And want to wish you luck in Japan, and hopefully we can see you off. Don't be too apprehensive. And also wanted to see if you wanted to say a couple words on the big NXT angle that happened last night.
You know what? When we bring it up, I'll definitely stay on the line to talk about it with you guys.
All right. Well, hold the line, and before we get to that, want to take a call or two. So 646, you're on with Wrestling Roundtable Radio. Name and location.
Name Jason Murdoch, Brooklyn, New York.
Big
Brooklyn.
fan.
Brooklyn.
Big fan of the show.
Thank you very much.
First show, Chris Noir. Oh, he knew that I speak of. So, which really got me. And, I just want to say thank you on behalf of me and the entire wrestling community of the movement y'all making. I really
Thank you very much.
appreciate it.
I'm glad to have you be a part of it. That's what this is, a movement.
Brooklyn.
Anyway,
the whole NXT angle from last night, the way it came out, I like how they sent Barrett in first, because he could be a possible, contender for Cena's title. And how they had to go out and Cena stopped it, that everybody comes in. It was better done than the ECW original angle years back.
There's been numerous ECW invasions. Which one?
The original one, the first one. The first one was the one when they first started the invasion angle where the Dudleys came out with thought that they was on WWE side, and it turned out to be a swerve. I like this angle because it was like these guys were hungry, like listen to us, and I love the part where Danielson said to Cena, "You're not better than me," because if you look at the parallel between John Cena and Danielson, one is most hated by the internet community being the worst wrestler ever, the most overrated wrestler ever, and one being the greatest wrestler ever. I like that parallel. And I thought maybe it should have been done better if it was on a better show.
Well, we don't have a time machine back to 1996, so we're going to have to just settle with what we have. And right now we're going to bring on Ryan from Massachusetts. Hello, Ryan.
You recognize me.
That caller ID thing, it's really new. Eric's just the first one to have it, so.
Lawrence, it's not my fault fucking Blog Talk Radio's got a shitty setup. Anyway, Ryan.
I really liked this angle they did last night. I mean, I think what made it better, even if it was unintentional, is how goofy and gimmicky and just pretty much retarded the rest of the show was. Even if it was unintentional, that goofy build-up made this little invasion thing all the better.
Ryan, can I ask Ryan a question? Do you think it was intentional? Because I've been wondering that the whole day. Do you think they intentionally made it with the A-Team angle, with the Kali and the Hornswoggle? They tried to make it as ridiculous as they could over the 3 hours to build to that, or do you think it was ineptitude on the writer's part? They stumbled on something.
Honestly, if they stumbled on it, they'll never admit to it. They'll claim that it was their idea. I think it was accidental. I mean, I think they legitimately believe we like watching Hornswoggle and Kali team up. Santino and Kali dance up. They think we like that.
Stuff was impressive.
If they're doing goofy shit to make it more serious at the end when they did the NXT, then they must have been building this up for years. And secondly, let's not forget that wrestlers are wrestling nerds for the most part, at least in this generation, and the writers are no better. So it's probably someone going, hey, let's do an NWO sort of thing last week. So now that we're right in the midst of it, I guess I'll throw my 2 cents in. First of all, when you called me up, Lawrence, I knew it must be serious, so I checked it out.
I called Eric at like 10:57. I think I was the first person to go, what the hell is this? And immediately had my cell phone. I was like, I think this is something that's going to be relevant tomorrow morning.
The last time I called anybody about anything that happened in wrestling was probably the Joe debut when he beat up, Kurt Angle debut when he beat up Samoa Joe on TNA. Maybe.
Not counting wrestlers dying, that is.
Well, for cool stuff. But this was almost what I had in mind years ago when the rumor was that they were going to bring back the NWO name for Orton and Edge or Rated RKO because Bischoff was the GM at the time and Orton had that rip-off shirt. My heart just dropped at the thought of those two being the NWO reincarnate. But I always thought that if they were going to do the NWO over again in any capacity, like they did last night, that's essentially what Hogan, Hall, and Nash should have been doing 8 years ago. That was the perfect sort of chaos, the perfect sort of destruction, and I know Bill, who wrote the recap for us on our website, is probably the only person in the world who didn't like it because he thought it set a bad example for the PG kid audience, but fuck them. I thought it was awesome.
Oh man, where to start? I think everybody online has said that they have had every possible positive reaction, and I do too. But I think the thing I want to focus on is they have to be, if they really are serious about this, if this is something that they've been planning for months and months with NXT as a vehicle to get people to watch NXT and as a vehicle to create a new heel faction that can feud with Cena, probably inevitably feud with Orton and help get him over even more and blah, 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 blah. I think they have to be so meticulously careful with everything they do from after 11 o'clock last night onward with shows, because right now this thing can get derailed very quickly. This thing's legs stand on the fact that the fans in the arena and probably the people at home who aren't quote-unquote smart fans really thought that something unique and special was happening, even if they didn't understand it. And the people who kind of know what's up, the fans like us, who've been blogging about it and writing about it all day, we're looking for them to screw it up because we're so keenly aware of how often they screw up angles just like this, like the ECW, WCW Invasion 1.0, 2.0, ECW Invasion, Alliance, blah, 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 NWO 2.0. They always screw up. Somebody online today said the WWEF has always been really good at the big one-on-one matches on the big shows. That's their strength. Whereas in the Crockett promotion, in the WCW, and even in ECW, they were really good at booking these stable type views, these faction warfare, these things where people get behind a concept as opposed to a feud or a wrestler. And I could go on and on listing things like the Freebirds and the Midnights and the Horsemen and the NWO. But the key is you have to keep the concept strong. Tonight on NXT, for example, the closing angle, they did a typical NXT show introducing the new guys and all that, but the way they ended it was all the pros jumped all the rookies and make a statement like we don't know what's going on, but we're not going to allow it to happen again. So my fear was that they would jump right into the explanation tonight. Now, even though you probably had more people watching NXT tonight than ever before, you can't blow the load on the explanation just yet because the angle is too big. It can't be an angle that pays off on NXT or even SmackDown. It has to be on Raw in the main event slot with Cena, with the top guys. It can't be a B-show thing. So to have tonight further it a little bit by saying, we don't know what happened last night, it's freaking us out, and we're going to do everything we can to prevent it, is the right move. So tonight they get another thumbs up for me. But they got to be so careful. You've got really green wrestlers. You've got a concept that's really strong, but really kind of
green.
No, well, generally speaking, on the whole, it's going to be tough to establish them individually right away. That is going to be very difficult to do. Even Danielson, because of the way he's been booked for the past 3 weeks, he's been feuding with Michael Cole and kind of feuding with The Miz. And now you're going to have him go in there.
I don't think green was the right term.
Well, it just again, I'm talking about the perception of the lay public, and even a lot of smart fans who just are looking for this thing to fail, even if they don't want it to fail. They're going to really take a paring knife to it and chop it apart. So they got to keep it up. They got to keep the concept big. They got to keep doing these big runs until these big destroying the set, beating up announcers, unless they really know where this is going. Because I don't think they actually know where they want this thing to end up, and that's what ended up killing the NWO. They knew bits and pieces of what they wanted out of the storyline, but they didn't really know what the end game was for it, and we ended up with basically WCW's downfall because of that storyline's downfall, among other things, and lack of planning. So they better be aware of what they have right now and be very careful booking it. Otherwise, it could dissipate very quickly.
And then NXT, we're taking over. I really thought that it was almost like what WCW was trying to do at the beginning of '98 when it became WCW/NWO. It was almost like, what is NXT going to take over all of Tuesday night? What do you think of this whole thing, Will?
The thing is that was one of the best things I've seen in almost a decade. This is why TNA can't do things like this. This TNA can't do something like this that shocks the fans. This was it was a really bad Raw, and then they're able to take a total surprise like they did last night and have the rookies come out and just destroy everybody. That was phenomenally done. There was nothing perfect. This is what Vince McMahon can do. He can make things look amazing when he really wants it to. And he did it last night. He was able, and, Wade Barrett.
How do you know he had anything to do with it aside from saying okay?
It doesn't matter. He has some input in the idea. I'm sure he did. You think the writers had everything to do with this? You don't think that someone stood up and said, okay, let's try this, because the way the writers do things these days?
NXT in and of itself is a classic WWE writer's concept, cheesy reality television. So I have to give them credit. I do agree with what Eric kind of said before. I think they did want to do this with these guys. Even though it's a great wrestling storyline, they may have stumbled into something.
I think this was planned for months. I don't think this was a shot in the dark. And back to what you said about the NWO, when the second version came in with WWE, they had to deal with a lot.
That was about the fifth, but what about?
Well, whatever. But you had a bunch of people who were older, and they are also, Scott Hall was drinking. You have Kevin Nash getting hurt, so you got 8 strong guys who are,
that could be today.
Well, they're young and fresh, and they're ready to go, and they are going to definitely do something with this. And the question I have to have, and that's just to the whole, to you guys, is that there's got to be a head guy behind the whole thing.
Why does there have to be? I don't agree with that, Will. I don't agree. I think that's a cliche thing. I think it's much scarier if these guys are just young, crazy wrestlers. You don't know what they're going to do. There is no master plan. Because as soon as you do the big higher power reveal, it turns it right back into cheesy WWE writing. I don't agree with that. I think keep it the way it is.
Let me make a natural comparison. You could have 2 kinds of bird flocks, let's say. You could have the Canadian geese flying in a V form where there's an obvious leader, which I guess would be Danielson in this case. Or you could have a whole bunch of birds flying in unison where the idea is to create a big biomass that you can't get one bird picked out in particular, and it looks like all these birds are flying as one. So maybe in NXT could be the latter rather than the former. If anything what I said.
One thing I wanted to state though too, which this is the only thing I think that was the problem with last night. They do have a major pay-per-view next, Sunday. No one now cares about that pay-per-view anymore. It's now about what happened on Raw. And again, Lawrence is right about how tonight they didn't really give it a result. And I think it's going to take a couple weeks for that to actually happen. I'm just saying that they might have a leader just because that's what most factions have, is they have someone standing out as the guy representing them. That's what I'm saying, that they always have it, and if they don't have one, then that's fine. You got Danielson and Wade Barrett, who probably are the leaders of this group, because they were the strongest out of the whole thing. So that's how I feel. I think they're going to have some leader, but I think that someone had to, take them off. It might be Michael Cole, because he didn't get attacked at all. So
anything like that will kill this angle. If Jim Ross comes back, or if Michael Cole reveals or Vince McMahon reveals he was behind it to get back at Bret Hart, that's going to kill this. This thing was unique because it was completely random, out of nowhere, and different. And the second they do anything cliche with it, people are going to write it off. Guaranteed.
I enjoyed it, and the worst thing I could say about it was that it went probably 8 minutes, a little too long. Jay, what are your thoughts on the NWO/NXT?
I absolutely loved it. I love the shock value of it. It's something that has been missing from WWE TV for the most part since the late 90s. The one thing I had that was a problem with it was the fact that these guys
more
were
negativity.
Well, this is just the one thing. I'm going to nitpick a little bit. These guys were dressed to wrestle. They were in their ring gear. I just don't understand it. If you have these guys who are invading, who are crusaders or whatever you want to call them, why would they be in their ring gear all oiled up, ready to fucking have a match on NXT on Tuesday night? It didn't make any sense to me.
Because wrestling is stupid.
Why did John Cena wear sneakers?
No one knows who they are. They have to look at their uniforms to know who they are. They are just too fresh to have them in gear.
Because people won't recognize Danielson if he's not wearing maroon tights.
I agree that if you would have have these guys come out and do close-ups on their faces, everybody would know who they are because they've been on Raw before. They've been on SmackDown before. The majority of people who watch Raw and SmackDown have seen all of these guys at one point or another. If they came out in street clothes like, say, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall did when they were invading WCW, it would have come off a lot more raw, and no pun intended, it would have come off a lot more genuine, like it was a genuine invasion. That's the only problem I had with it. Other than that, I thought it came off really well. It was shocking. John Cena got his ass kicked. I love how Bryan Danielson actually punched him in the ear, which was a big plus to it. And if anybody who saw Danielson's last Ring of Honor match should know that he promised to punch John Cena in the ear. And I think this will lead to a lot of great things with John Cena, because now he can go back to being that baby face where his back is up against the wall against this group, not just a guy, not just Batista or fucking Randy Orton or the same old guys he's been feuding with for years, but now he's got this group of young, pissed off guys who basically wanted to take his head off last night. So I love it. I can't wait to see what happens next, and that's about it.
NXT. One thing that I did love about it was the crowd reaction, because they reacted to it perfectly. Like when they beat up Matt Striker, it was shocking. Whoa! They had that reaction when they got on the apron and surrounded John Cena. Oh! And even when Cena realized that he was going to get his ass beat and made somewhat of a little comeback with a couple swings, people were cheering. But do you think, Chris, that the Michael Jackson getting burned after the Pepsi commercial, waving with the gloved hand on the gurney shot that I like to compare the Cena thumbs up on the stretcher to, was a little too much?
Wow, did you just date yourself? That was so descriptive. I love it.
It definitely was a little too much, but I did love the angle. I don't have anything negative to say about it. I mean, the worst you can say about it, I didn't see the beginning of it. When I heard, you got to tune into Raw, I saw a bunch of rookies taking the ring apart. I was like, wow, they left the cameras on and we're watching the ring through.
Nice.
But I thought it was very well done. I was not even 24 hours beforehand. I was sitting in the car with Rodney saying, wow, I don't think anything will ever come along that'll get me to watch again. And maybe this is it. Maybe this will get me to watch again, because you have Danielson and Bret Hart on Raw, and that still wasn't enough for me to be watching. Maybe this will be it if it's done well.
Well, it definitely was reminiscent of the early NWO attacks of the summer of '96. What do you think of this, Mr. Payne? You said it was on those levels, and I said, well, let's not jump to conclusions, because this is hardly the star power. It was more of a stylistic thing.
And he left.
Fell asleep. Rodney?
This was probably the best thing I've seen on Raw since the Hogan Rock stare down 8 years ago.
Well, I like that.
It's really because there are few things in wrestling now that really get fans like us really talking and exciting again. And watching this over, you got that excited feeling. Like, the thing that worked with NWO and Nitro was that the NWO coming from the stands gave Nitro and the announcers that feeling that, like, anything could happen at any time. And it kind of had everybody off balance, where as a viewer, you never knew what to expect and when to expect it. And this came, it was very random, and it came out of nowhere. And another great point that it hit was that probably since Brock Lesnar, I feel that heel wasn't really brought up with a monster push. I mean, for years we've tried. We've had young guys shoved down our throats, and they get to one level and then they lose the match that they need to win in order to excel at that next level. And they'd either get the belt 3 years too late or it wouldn't work. This one, they took guys, very young guys that the audience generally knows. Danielson, more people know. And they put him in this angle that no one saw coming. And I think it really worked. I think even beating up Punk gave that angle where they're going to attack anybody. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're sitting in the ring or you're announcing or whatever, and taking apart the ring was it just really added to it, that NWO style. And I agree with you, Eric, that I think that the NWO in 2002, I would have liked to see them. I also said that I would like to see them debut, whether they come out in the middle of the show randomly and take apart the set. But to counteract what Jay said, I know Jay was complaining about them being in their shorts. Well, the difference between that and NWO is that NWO, I guess in the storyline, wasn't under contract with WCW. They're outsiders. They're guys who had to buy tickets to come to the shows. these are guys who, could have been backstage already part of the universe, I guess you could say. So then being in the wrestling type
word.
I know, but then being in the wrestling type made sense because they're already part of the WWE roster. So
they've already been wrestling there for how many months now?
Well, I heard Michael Cole say when Danielson was coming out, he's not even a part of the company anymore. He's off fantasy. He's not even a part of the company. They've alluded to the fact that these guys are no longer a part of the company. But I get your point. I think it could have added to it if they were in street clothes.
Kind of like how Shawn Michaels is retired, wink, wink. Speaking of which, am I the only one who thinks that Shawn Michaels is starting to look like Hacksaw Duggan?
Wow, no. But yeah, I mean, like Lauren said, really right now they really have to tiptoe their way around this angle because now they got something that has my attention. I mean, they had my attention January 4th with Bret Hart, but they kind of died out, and this is one thing where they cannot screw up. If they screw this up, then they absolutely retarded. Has this been something working in the months? I don't know. If it is, then, that's very risky, but I would give them a lot of credit for doing it. But it's the fact that, it happened to Cena, too, which is good. I almost wish it happened to DX. But, I mean, yeah, let's see, because, a lot of the factions that have been formed over the past few years, they're feuding within each other within the next 2 months. So hopefully that doesn't happen with this one.
Don't worry, when Triple H comes back at SummerSlam, he'll beat them all in one match.
That's what I'm saying. That's the key here. You know what? That's what happened with the first invasion. He was off TV the whole damn time. And the key here is it can't just be Cena. It's got to be all the top faces. He comes back. If this thing's got legs, if it's going strong, he's got to get beat up by Barrett or lose to Sheffield or Slater. He can't be an exception. If these guys are going to get over, just like any other new guys, like Rod said, you get them to a point, you got to get that win. Him and Undertaker can't do what they did to Paige back in 2001 and to all the guys in the Invasion and the NWO. They all have to take the beating and take it just like Cena did. That's why Cena's the man, like Eric always says. Cena's the man because he does the right thing. He totally played the perfect role last night. Michael Jackson waving hand and all.
I love John Cena, but he really needs to work on his fist drops. They miss by a mile. They look terrible. I love him, but that's the only thing he needs to work on, I think.
Do you guys think that maybe this is kind of like they're getting to the point, Undertaker's getting old, Shawn Michaels is gone, Batista's gone, that maybe they're starting to realize finally, we need to make new stars because all those guys we had our future on, we fired.
They should have realized that like 5 years ago.
I think this angle has a big potential to be even more than just pushing the new guys. This as a concept is so unique. It can be the thing that doesn't just bring in new stars, but kind of turns the business on its ear.
It's not unique. It's the NWO.
No, we don't know that yet. We don't know that it's the NWO. I think the NWO is always used as a basis of comparison for this kind of storyline where they tear the arena apart, even though that's been done in syndicated shows for 20 years before the NWO. Point is, it can be something very unique. These guys are not established guys from another company coming in with Hulk Hogan invading. This is a different thing. These are the angry young wrestlers who hate this concept of the universe. They've been disenfranchised. They've been mocked, and they're pissed off muscleheads who just want to beat the crap out of everybody. It's not the same thing. There's elements of the NWO, but all great storylines are derivative from other storylines. I wouldn't just write it off and say it's the NWO. It's not the NWO. Yes.
We've seen that storyline, the young guys versus the old guys, but hopefully this will be the first time they actually get it right.
That's what I was thinking.
Get it right. They're going to get it right if they really try. I mean, this is exactly the point. You can't compare it to the NWO. I don't like comparing anything to anything. This is a new concept, a new idea that you can't.
In WWF terms, yes, this could be a new concept because there are some fans like Mitch who didn't really watch WCW, so they might not know all the details of what NWO did back in in '96 and early '97. But I mean, yes, they're comparable to NWO, but right now it's too early to say that it's very comparable to NWO. It's too early to say anything, and hopefully we're guessing for a few more weeks.
I mean, at face value, this storyline, if you just look at exactly what was presented, all the NXT guys were sick and tired of being treated like crap, and they freaked out, and they had the reaction on John Cena and the whole company that the smart fans have wanted to see for the past 10 years. And that is pretty damn cool at face value with nothing else added to it. There's a lot to be said for that.
From the chat room, codenamed Sailor Earth says, do you think this angle will jeopardize Wade's push?
If they come out on Raw, first thing you cut a promo, it's ruined. It's done. If they come out first thing on Raw, music hits, they all come down the aisle and cut some promo and fight.
They have a slick entrance video.
Yeah, then it's ruined. It's gone.
They got to be really careful. You guys got it. Every little thing matters with this, you know? It really does.
Hope
they need a slow burn, just like the NWO that took all summer to get to Hogan. You need a slow burn. This needs to lead to like SummerSlam before we get something big out of it.
Or we even get an explanation. We may need to wait a while to even understand what's happening. That's the key. It took weeks and weeks and months to even know why Hall was there, why Nash was there. Now there's a third man. Now Bischoff's involved. Now, you know, they think Sting is with them. They think Luger is with them. And it took 7-8 months for that thing to really, really become, you know, to make WCW a force. And that's the key.
Let's go to Corey in Chicago. Hello, Corey.
Hello, Eric, and hello, Alex, if you're still on.
He's not. Forget about him. Let's talk about NXT.
He's busy watching anime, getting ready for his trip.
I'm sure you have some thoughts on the big angle that wasn't the NWO.
Well,
Exactly.
Actually, it reminded me a lot more of when ECW invaded WWF RAW. I do believe right before or right after NWO started. A few other companies say that they've each done invasion angles like this. Certainly Chikara had the BDK angle not that long ago. Do you think that this is the proper way to get all of the NXT rookies over?
Like I said, I don't think the goal here is to get 8 people over. I think the goal is to create a concept that will allow for certain people to shine. And already last night we could tell certain people looked a lot more interesting than they did 2 or 3 weeks ago. Danielson's been consistently interesting for most of NXT. But, for example, last night, seeing Heath Slater and Justin Gabriel, who I had no interest in, act like heels and beat up an announcer, I was really intrigued by them and seeing what those guys are going to do. It's really scary when you're a kid to see these two, babyface, generic white bread type wrestlers beating the crap out of an announcer, stripping him down and choking him with a tie. I mean, it's like horror movie stuff.
It was the perfect amount of chaos.
I think that it is going to get everybody over because up until yesterday, I couldn't pick Heath Slater out of a lineup of 1. So it actually got me interested to actually look up who these guys are besides Wade Barrett, Danielson, and anybody else I might have known.
And they made Skip Sheffield look like a monster last night. The crowd popped huge. They made sure his clothesline was the last one, and he knocked Cena on his ass, and the crowd was like, wow, that guy's big. He wasn't scary and big before this angle. All of a sudden, he's a monster. Amazing.
When was the last time on a Raw that you guys saw the whole crowd standing the entire time? And also there was no announcing, so it made it more realistic without the announcing actually going on. But that's the first time I've seen the crowd stand up the whole time. Like they didn't sit down until, for no reason. They had to watch this. Like when was the last time we've seen that?
The great folding chairs, the theft of 2003.
I knew that something special was going on. As soon as I heard, the tremble, Michael Cole's voice when they started coming out from the crowd. And then from there, I think the crowd reacted perfectly. They were like shocked, they stunned, but they knew something big was happening.
Plus, we also didn't hear any word on them doing anything along these lines. So good for them to finally get something to not break out on the internet with their nerd writers in the office spilling their guts to all these dirt sheets. I hope that the fans are finally going to be happy and not complain about Bryan Danielson in WWE anymore, because not only was he in the angle that's gotten people to talk about what they've been doing more than anything recently, he was right up there with John Cena too. So putting those two together was pretty important, and I think we've also said a lot of words on this, and there might be a lot more to say. And I invite you to join our message board, or perhaps write a guest column for our website, or to leave comments on any of our videos or other social networks. So you can get all the links to that: Twitter, iTunes, Go Fight Live, MySpace, Facebook, and YouTube, all on WrestlingRoundtable.com. We invite you to also shop at our Amazon store. If you're going to get anything WWE, TNA, or UFC, please shop there first so we can get a little cut of it. Or you can support the show by getting Pro Wrestling Respect products, ProWrestlingRespect.com, or the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt at WrestlingRoundtable.com. If you see an ad, you better click it. So for the panel of Chris Harris, Jason Aledo, Will Vafides, Rodney LeConte, special guest Alex Payne, Lawrence Haber, I'm Eric Santamaria. See you in a couple weeks, and blessed be.